So homework 24 is starting out evaluating things that have exponents of 0. If you grab your calculator for me, you got your calculator handy. If you put in parentheses, 2 fraction 3, close the parenthesis, and use the caret key for the exponent, to the 0 power. What do you get when you do 2/3 to the 0 power?
1.
You get 1. The rule is if you have anything to the 0 power, it's always equal to 1. The reason that's true is what it means is you're taking something divided by itself. If you have x to the 3rd divided by x to the 3rd, my rule in algebra is to subtract your exponents. Well, when you do 3 minus 3, you get 0, right? But you know that anything divided by itself, you really say, oh, that goes into there once and that goes into there once, and you just get a 1. So although it makes no sense, that's what's happening. Whenever you take something to the 0 power, it cancels it out, it's equal to 1. Now, if I happen to have something in front, I have to do my exponent first. So 4 to the 0 power is equal to 1, but then I've got the negative in front of this one, so it ends up being -1 for my answer. And again, for fun, you could just verify that with your calculator. If I put negative parentheses 4, close my parenthesis, caret 0, -4 to the 0 power, my calculator says -1. So on number 2, if I'm going to do -3/4 to the 0 power, -3/4 to the 0 power
1.
is going to be 1. The whole thing's in the parentheses, so I just get the 1. If I do 3 times 2 to the 0 power, I'm going to get
3.
3, because 2 to the 0 power is 1, so I get 3 times 1, which happens to be 3. If we do the third one, we have -5/6 to the 0 power. -1. This is going to be 1, but the negative's in front, so it stays on our answer. And if I do 2 times -1/3 to the 0 power, I get 2. -1/3 to the 0 power is 1, so I have 2 times 1, which just gives me 2. Number 4, 5, and 6, and a whole bunch of the rest of this has to do when you have a negative exponent. If you have the negative exponent, they'll say something like x to the -m. To get rid of the negative exponent and make it positive, you do the reciprocal, 1 over x to the +m. So if I have a fraction, the reciprocal of my fraction, 5/7, would be making it 7/5. So this could be written as 7/5 to the +2 exponent. Now if I square that, 7 squared is 49, 5 squared is 25. Again, if I wanted to check that with my calculator, I would put in parentheses 5 fraction 7ths, and then I'd use the caret key to the -2 power. Now what shows up on your calculator screen when you do that?
25 over 49.
It gives you 25 over 49 once you change your, or no it doesn't. Shouldn't. Did you do -2 power?
So 5 over 7?
7, do 5 over 7 to the -2. That's the original problem.
Okay, 5 over 7. I didn't do the negative.
Ah. So if you don't do the negative, it won't flip it upside down. If you do the negative, what do you get?
I get 1/24 over 20.
And then if you change that into the improper fraction by hitting Shift and the fraction button,
Shift in the fraction.
yep, Shift in the ABC,
Oh yeah, 49.
there's the 49/25. So the negative flips your fraction and makes the exponent positive, and then I'm just really squaring both of those. This is on chapter 4 if you haven't grabbed that packet off the counter.
Okay.
So number 5, if I want to do 2/3 to the negative 3 power, if I'm not doing it with my calculator, since my exponent is negative, I do the reciprocal of my base. The reciprocal of 2/3 would be 3 over 2, and then they make my exponent a positive 3. Now I just cube both of my numbers. 3 to the 3rd power would be 27, and 2 to the 3rd power would be 8. So I would have 27 over 8. But again, if you want to check it with your calculator, you would do the 2/3 to the negative 3 power. If it gives you the mixed number, you then change it to the improper fraction. So number 6, if I have 2/9 to the negative 1 power, again my exponent is negative, so the first thing I do is the reciprocal. The reciprocal would be 9 over 2. That makes it to the positive 1 power, and if it's to the first power, it's going to stay the same thing. 9 over 2.
Okay, and that top one, what is that? Like the end part? Or
This
like,
is
what
how
does that
you
mean?
punch it into your calculator.
Oh, okay.
If you want to put it into your calculator and check it. Same thing holds true when you have a whole number. The reciprocal of a negative 4 would be putting 1 over negative 4, right? Because this is really negative 4 over 1. So if my exponent is negative, which it is, the first thing I'm going to do is the reciprocal, 1 over negative 4. I'm then going to make my exponent positive. Now on Alex, they only put the exponent by the bottom number because 1 to any power always stays 1. But really it's the whole thing to the 3rd power. I don't like how they write it. 1 to the 3rd power stays 1. Negative 4 to the 3rd power, negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4 would be negative 64. Of course, we know on Alex they don't really like you to put the negative down on the bottom, so on your answer they would say negative 1/64. And the same thing if you wanted to check that with your calculator, you would put in negative 4 caret to the negative 3rd power, and since that one's a proper fraction, it should come out as negative 1/64. Ooh, clear. So number 8, if I want to do negative 3 to the negative 2 power. Again, my exponent is negative. I'm going to do the reciprocal of negative 3, which would be
1 over negative 3.
1 over negative 3, and then I'm going to square that. If I square that, I'm going to get
Positive 9.
1 over 9,
Oh.
right?
1 over 9.
Still the 1 on the top, 9 on the bottom, so 1/9 is what my answer would be. So number 9, again I have that negative exponent, so I'm going to do the reciprocal of negative 2, which would be
1 over negative 2.
1 over negative 2, and then I'm going to raise it to the 4th power. So I would get
1 over negative 16.
now if I do negative 2 to the 4th power, what's my sign going to be?
Oh, positive.
It's going to be positive 16. So if you're using your calculator, make sure you put the parentheses around there so you get the right sign on your answer. But if my exponent is even, should make it positive because I'm going to have 4 negative signs. So I get 1 over positive 16, 1/16. So now they're going to throw those rules together so that you can compare. So all of these have negative exponents. I'm going to do the reciprocal and then do what the exponent says. If I do 1/2 to the negative 1, I would make it 2 over 1 to the positive 1, which is just 2 then. If I have 1/2 to the negative 2, I make it 2 over 1 to the positive 2. 2 squared is 4, and now I can compare 2 is less than 4. So if I'm doing 2 to the negative 2, I'm going to rewrite it as
1 over negative 4.
No.
1 over 4.
I'm going to write it as 1/2 to the second power, so I get 1 over 4. Right? The reciprocal of 2 is 1/2. Then I'm going to make it a positive 2 exponent, and 1/2 squared is 1/4. If I do 1/2 to the negative 2,
is less than 4.
it's going to be less than 4, because this is going to be 2 over 1 squared, like the top one, and I'm going to get 4, and 1/4 is going to be less than 4 then. So 2 to the negative 1 power would be 1 over 2. 1 over 2 to the first, which is still 1 over 2. 2 to the negative 2 power would be
Wouldn't that be a negative?
no, because the base isn't negative, the exponent is negative.
Oh.
So it would be 1/4, because I do 1/2 to the positive 2, which then makes it 1/4. So it'd only be negative, or might be negative, if the base number was negative, and I don't have any negatives on my base number, just my exponents. So 1/2 compared to 1/4.
1/2 is greater than
1/2 is greater than 1/4. If you weren't sure, you would make your common denominator, which happens to be 4. 1/2 is 2/4, and we know 2/4 is bigger than 1/4. So if you needed to, or you could change them to decimals. 1/2 is 0.5, 1/4 is 0.25, and so you could compare them that way if you weren't sure on your fractions. So, quick way to think about this is, you think about what 4 squared is, but then you have to do the reciprocal because your exponent is negative. 4 squared is 16, so the reciprocal means I'm going to have 1 over 16, right? 4 to the negative 2 would be 1 over 16. 4 to the negative 1 would be
4.
1 over
Oh, 1 over
4, because I have to do the reciprocal since my exponent is negative. 1/16 compared to 1/4.
1/16 is less than
1/16 is less than 1/4. So if I'm doing 1/4 to the negative 1, I'm going to get
4.
4. 4 to the negative 2 would be
1/16.
1/16, exactly. 4 squared is 16th, but my exponent is negative, so I had to do the reciprocal 1/16. 4 compared to 1/16, well, we know a whole number is bigger than a fraction. So on the next one, we have 4 to the negative 2, which we already did and said was 1/16. If I have 1/4 to the negative 2, what am I going to get?
1/8
Nope.
or 1/16.
Nope.
Wait.
If it was a positive 2, it would be 1/16.
Negative 1/16.
No.
Wait.
What does the negative do?
I'm confused, Kate. Some of them have parentheses with.
The parentheses don't make a whole lot of difference.
Oh, they don't.
No. If there were negative on the bases, it'd make a difference, but since they're positive bases, it really doesn't make much difference. But what does the negative do? The negative does the reciprocal.
16.
So it's going to be 16 instead of 1/16, right?
Yeah.
So the negative does the reciprocal of your base. Flips it upside down. So if it's a fraction, it became a whole number. If it was a whole number, it becomes a unit fraction. 1/16 is less than 16. We'll find out on 12 if we got this straight yet. So 1/2 to the negative 2 power. Would be 4, exactly. 1/2 to the negative 1 power.
2.
Would be 2. 4 is greater than 2. 2 to the negative 2 power.
1/4.
1/4. 1/2 to the negative 2 power.
4.
Would be 4. 1/4 is less than 4. 1/2 to the negative 1 power
2.
is 2. And 2 to the negative 2 power,
1/4.
1/4. 2 is greater than 1/4. Worst case, punch it into your calculator and you should get the right things, but really that's all that's doing. If you have a negative exponent, I have to do the reciprocal. So if it was a fraction, it became a whole number. If it was a whole number, it became fraction. Now, because they want to get across the point that that exponent, if there are not parentheses, only goes with what it's next to, that this is really 4 times v to the negative 4. If I want to simplify that, this is the only part that I'm going to rewrite. What is 4 to the negative 4th power written with a positive exponent? What would be the reciprocal of that? 1 over v to the 4th. 1 over v to the 4th power. So what happens is when I combine that, I get the 4 over v to the 4th power. So if this is on top and I have a negative exponent, it's just going to pull it down to the bottom of the fraction. The number is not going to move because that doesn't have an exponent on it. Just the variable is going to move. So if I have 6v to the negative 5 and I want to write it with a positive exponent, what am I going to end up with?
6 over v to the 5th.
6 over v to the 5th power. And I don't know why I have 3 that all look the same. I'm going to change this one. I'm going to write it as 1 over 2n to the negative 4, just so it doesn't look like all the rest of them. So what do you think is going to happen with this one? What would be the reciprocal of 1 over n to the negative 4?
For n?
No.
Wait, just kidding.
When I do the reciprocal, what's going to happen? It's just going to flip it upside down, right? It's going to make it n to the positive 4 over 1. So if my negative exponent's on the bottom, it's going to move it up to the top. So this is going to be 1 over 2, and the n to the 4th ends up being up there. Now in this case, since there's a 1 up there, we really don't need the 1. So I just get n to the 4th over 2. So just for fun, if I would have 2 over 3x to the negative 2 power, what do you think your answer is going to look like? Nope. It's going to flip something, but it's not going to flip the 2 and the 3 because the 2 and the 3 don't have a negative exponent. Only the x has the negative exponent. Ah, so it's going to be 2x squared over 3. That's the only thing that's going to move. If it's on the bottom, it's going to go to the top. If it were on the top, it's going to go on the bottom. We'll get some more practice down here. So now we're following our rule when we're simplifying. We basically are grouping our like things together. So we're going to take our 2 times our 7 times our 4, the coefficients all together. Then we have a v times a v to the negative 1, doing my v's. Then I have an x to the negative 2 times an x to the negative 4. And then I have a u to the 7th times a u to the negative 1. So on our numbers, we're just going to multiply them. 2 times 7 times 4. Well, I have the commutative property, so I'd probably do the 2 times the 4 is 8, and 8 times 7 is 56. Or you could do 14 times 4. You get the same answer. When I do my exponents, my rule is that I'm adding my exponents when I have the same base. If I have an x squared times an x to the 3rd, I get x to the 5th. I add those exponents. Now in this case, if I have v to the 1st times v to the negative 1, what happens? It cancels out, right? I get 0. That's going to be gone. Here I have x to the negative 2 times x to the negative 4, so if I add my exponents, I get x to the negative 6. U to the 7th times u to the negative 1 would be u to the 6th. Now we want to write our answers using only positive exponents. We have a negative exponent, so what do we have to do with that x to the negative 6?
Bring it to the bottom.
It's going to go down to the bottom to make that exponent positive. So I get 56u to the 6th over x to the positive 6th exponent. When I do that reciprocal, flips it down to the bottom of my fraction. So number 17. Going to start out with my numbers. I have an 8 times a 4 times a 2. $64. Then I'm going to do my variables. I have a v to the 6th and a v to the negative 8. I would get
v to the negative 2.
v to the negative 2. I'll do my x's. I have an x to the negative 5 and a plain x.
X to the negative 4.
X to the negative 4.
And y squared.
And you already did y squared. How did you get y squared?
Or wait, just kidding, I didn't see that. Negative 8.
Negative 8, because I have y to the negative 4 and another y to the negative 4. Y to the negative 8. So, if I look at that, I've got a whole bunch of negative exponents and I want to make them positive. What do you think my answer looks like?
64 over v to the squared, x to the 4th, y to the 8th.
Exactly. All of those end up going down to the bottom, but the 64 stays where it's at, which is on top, because that doesn't have a negative exponent. So the 64 is on top, then we got v to the 2nd, x to the 4th, and y to the 8th on the bottom. So number 18, what am I going to do to simplify that?
84.
7 times 2 times 6 is 84.
U to the negative 5.
So I'm going to have u times u to the negative 6, which is u to the negative 5.
X to the 4th.
I have x to the negative 4 times x to the 8th, which is x to the positive 4.
That's it.
And
The
that's
other ones
it,
cancel.
because I have a v to the 9th and a v to the negative 9, which cancel out. So my answer with only positive exponents would be
84x to the 4th, u to the 5th. Oh, over u to the 5th.
84x to the 4th over u to the 5th. Exactly. So, negative exponents. If there's a negative exponent, you end up doing the reciprocal of whatever you have to make it positive.